Preface. In contemporary Mexico, Emiliano Zapata and his followers have come to symbolize the essence of the Mexican Revolution of 1910. The focal point of the revolution was the desire for land reform, and the Zapatistas, the men of the South, were the agrarian reformers of the revolution par excellence. Zapata issued the Plan of Ayala in 1911, which called for the division of lands, and he and his followers fought persistently courageously for the principles of their plan until the regime of Álvaro Obregón made peace with the remaining Zapatistas in 1920 by promising genuine agrarian reform. It is principally a consequence of the struggle of the men of the South that the Mexican Revolution achieved the profound agrarian content in which has marked it to this day. Although the distribution of land was their primary objective, the Zapatistas also developed an integrated program for national, economic, social, and political reforms. This national revolutionary program of the men of the South possessed a clearly defined ideological orientation. It shall be the purpose of this work to examine the agrarian heart as well as the broader aspects of Zapata's movement, and thereby attempt to clarify the role of the Zapatistas in the Mexican Revolution. The discussion in the initial chapter of this work concerning the armed struggle of Zapatistas movement is not definitive, and will serve merely to make the analysis of Zapatista ideology more meaningful. Mexico's intellectual life in the early 20th century was exposed to the varied tendencies of Western thought: liberalism, positivism, Bergsonian institutionalism, anarchism, socialism, and many other philosophical currents influence the Mexican mind. Liberalism had played a significant role in Mexico's intellectual and political history since that nation's independence movement in the early 19th century, and formed part of the fabric of Mexican thought. His work will seek to determine the nature of ideology which Zapata's movement formulated for itself amid this welter of philosophical cross-currents. It would not be concerned with the origins of history of these concepts in themselves. Mexico, DF, January 1969. RPM. Contents: The struggle of the Zapatistas, agrarianism, liberalism, and anti-imperialism, misconceptions concerning Zapatista ideology, revolutionary tactics, the fate of Zapatista ideology, appendix, reference notes, list of works cited, index. Zapata, the ideology of a peasant revolutionary. Chapter 1. The struggle of the Zapatistas. Seek justice from tyrannical governments, not with your head with your hands, but with a rifle in your fist. Emiliano Zapata. Mexico in 1910 was a land dominated by large landed estates called haciendas. Labor on the haciendas was provided by peasants bound by debt to the state and by sharecroppers and renters. Hacienda production tended to be traditional and routine. Owners invested as little capital as possible in their estates. Production was in part for use and in part for sale upon the market. That is to say, the needs for the hacienda for such things as food, building materials, and work animals were met as far as possible by the hacienda itself. In addition, the hacienda produced a commercial crop which was sold upon the market. Part of the proceeds of this sale were used to purchase whatever essentials could not be produced on the hacienda, and the remaining cash income was used by the hacendado, hacienda owner, to maintain himself and his family in customary ease in some metropolitan center. The political, economic, and social life of the nation was controlled by an oligarchy composed of the hacendados, of members of the upper echelons of the military, political, and religious structures, and of wealthy merchants and businessmen, all in tacit league with a small number of foreign capitalists. The vast majority of the population consisted of peasants bound by debt to the haciendas. a system of production whereby workers are bound to large, privately owned landed estates which produce partially for use and partially for sale upon the market, will be referred to in this work and semi-feudal mode of production. The economic and political life of the state of Morelos, the birthplace of Emiliano Zapata and the heartland of his movement, was controlled by a few wealthy men. According to one author, 30 haciendas owned 62% of the total surface area and almost all of the cultivated land in Morelos. Ayler Simpson noted that of all states in the Republic, Morelos was the prize exhibit of a state in which the villages, in their corporate capacity, and the inhabitants thereof, in their private capacity, before 1910 had suffered the greatest losses of land, and in which the concentration of land holding in the hands of a few hacendados had reached its apogee. Sugar cultivation